Recent count of people experiencing homelessness in Parkersburg found more than 200 people. That is less than 1% of the city's population. Parkersburg Mayor Tom Joyce says the homeless crisis has been a problem for the last few years, saying those who don't use the available resources create other issues like vacant house fires.
Folks oftentimes in this population refuse to abide by the rules of participating in some of those programs. So instead of spending the night in a shelter or seeking treatment, which comes with shelter and those kind of things, they'll go into an abandoned house like we have here on Beaver Street.
According to Parkersburg Fire Chief Jason Matthews, the department has responded to 9 abandoned house fires just through the first 4 months of the year. That is more than half the total 12 vacant house fires they experienced in 2024. While some of these house fires required emergency demolition, some are still standing and on the list to be demolished. But the biggest safety concerns happen when the house fire causes the building to collapse, like this one here that caught fire and collapsed in January of this year.
Bottom line is create an unsafe condition for our fire personnel. Police have been responding for months, trying to run people out of there. The building was properly placarded, and now the taxpayer just paid for this demolition and will likely never get our money back.
Chief Matthews says nobody is ever inside these abandoned homes when the fire department arrives, but multiple neighbors say they watched homeless people go in and out of these houses before they caught fire. No injuries have been reported with any of these vacant house fires either.
And that's a blessing. We're lucky, but I don't want to play those odds forever because eventually somebody's going to get hurt. And I pray to the God Almighty that it's not one of our firefighters.
Despite nobody being found inside the houses during the fires, the fire department says they have found mattresses, cigarette butts, drug paraphernalia, and other items that show people were recently staying inside. In Parkersburg, I'm Shiloh Florence.